Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Ann Mercer. Welcome to my Positive Life Answers podcast. I'm your podcast host and self-improvement expert, Dr. Ann Mercer. You can call me Dr. Mary. Might be wondering, who is Dr. Mary and why should I listen to her podcast? Importantly, I'm a book author, speaker, psychologist, and intensive coaching co-creator. I've achieved a lot in my life despite many setbacks and obstacles, which I'll share with you via my own story. I co-authored many books, including Spontaneous Optimism, and my new book that I wrote is called Bouncing Back from Difficult Times. So let's get started with today's podcast. Welcome to episode 66, Overcoming Setbacks. This is such an important universal topic that everyone encounters in their quest to improve their lives at any time in their lives. So listen up here. In my Positive Life Answers podcast, my goal is to help you transform the quality of your life and help you create the life you desire. The goal of my podcast is to help you make improvements and changes in practical and empowering ways. If you're new to my podcast and just discovered me, a warm welcome. I'm so glad you found me. Don't forget to press that follow button of this podcast so you don't miss out on future episodes. And thanks to those who have been following me and are supporting this podcast. Are you experiencing a setback in your life? Is your path to improving yourself and your life not taking a straight line to your goals and hopes? This podcast is for you. Setbacks in the process of improving yourself and your life is not uncommon, so please don't worry. They're part of the journey. But there's some really important things to remember about setbacks so you don't get stuck there. Setbacks can be big or small challenges or potential obstacles. How we handle them and react to them can be quite telling about where we're at in our lives. Setbacks can be big or small challenges. How we react and handle them are quite telling about where we're at in our own lives and our development. I want to help you break through the disappointments of setbacks. Today you will learn how to overcome setbacks, why some of us get stuck when a setback or shift in your path to change occurs, and an important motivational hack that you'll never forget. Let's get started. On our road to accomplishing our goals and making improvements and changes in our lives, we'll experience times when something happens that can set us back if we allow them to. Setbacks and obstacles happen. Unexpected things pop up. How we handle and react to them is very important. In my own experiences and working with others in my intensive coaching sessions and workshops, I have found a couple types of individuals that seem to overcome setbacks and problems better than most people. And there are two types of people, and they're resilient and optimistic people. There's some practical ways you can learn from them. And you can learn from people who bounce back from difficult times in my book called Bouncing Back from Difficult Times. So resilient people. Resilience is a process of adapting well in the face of setbacks and ongoing stresses in any parts of our life. Resilient people know how to handle problems and hard times. The trait of resilience means that you're better able to cope with these difficult times or challenges or setbacks. This means that you not only cope better, but you also find a way to resolve it. And resilient people seem naturally to draw on their past experience that they overcame and use them as a reference point to help them overcome their current situations. So resilience is a process of adapting well. So remember that. According to the American Psychological Association, which I am a full member of, resilience involves rebounding from a setback or difficult experience. Doing this can result in a profound growth for an individual. So while adverse events or setbacks can be difficult, they don't have to determine the rest of your life. They don't determine whether or not you keep pursuing your goals. Resilient people understand that there are many aspects of their life that they can't control and change. So becoming resilient, as we'll talk about now, helps you get through these circumstances. So resilience often involves certain behaviors, thoughts, and actions that anyone can learn and develop, including you, the listener. So let's focus on what they do when a setback or roadblock appears in their path. Number one, what I've been impressed with is they accept the situation. Resilient people tend to accept the situation. They don't deny that there's a setback or problem. However, they accept the situation facing them instead of fighting it off. They appear to understand and accept their reactions to it. They face the uncertainty and feelings of uneasiness and worries. However, they don't get stuck there, and they understand the need to let go and move on. They do this by making some changes in their goals and plans for their lives. We'll talk a little bit more about that today as well. They accept the need to make changes. That's another important bullet point. They accept the need to make changes. Resilient people know that they cannot always control everything, events and circumstances in their life or surrounding them. However, they know they can choose and control how they react. They don't deny the situation, as we talked about, but they appear to know they need to move on and do something about it. They focus on the aspects of the situation that are under their control, which makes them more able to weather the storm. So from there, they go into problem solving to figure out what their options are and steps they can take. And as you can hear in these 2 bullet points, the next one will make a lot of sense. They're adaptable and flexible. So along with acceptance and knowing that they need to take some type of action, resilient people are adaptable and flexible. And this is very important. They don't bend and they don't let the difficult times break them. A lot of times when setbacks come up, people throw the towel in and they let it just destroy them. But resilient people, they're flexible to make a shift or a change in the midst of a setback. They display much wonderful skills of flexibility, and they're not inflexible. So what you can learn from these people is that they deal with their reactions, they accept the situation, they acknowledge the need for change in their position in a flexible manner. This includes maybe changing their goal or their path for their lives. This means overall that you're not only able to cope, but you're able to find a way to resolve it and move past it and actually come out better ahead. So the last important point that they do, as well as optimistic people, they think that problems don't last forever. Resilient and optimistic people do not believe that problems will go on forever. They cope and move on to tell themselves that the problem will pass. They don't begin to tell a story about it that it'll last forever. And that's important to know. So sometimes people get into this mode of this is going to last forever and they start hypnotizing themselves to give up. Resilient, optimistic people focus on what they can do, the parts that they control, and their reactions to the situation. They know deep inside that problems will pass, yet they take action to figure out what they can do in the meantime to shift and adapt. This reminds me of a quote from Albert Einstein, which I shared in one of my groups. Everything that exists in your life does so because of 2 things: something you did or something you didn't do. So in thinking about that quote, remember, setbacks are a part of the process and expected at some point in your process. However, try to avoid some patterns that you may fall into so you don't get stuck there and not able to move on. I see many ways that people get stuck, and we'll just talk about a few of them. When setbacks happen, some people who get stuck and reactive instead of figuring out what to do are in the blaming mode. They blame others or the circumstances around them. There are times and situations when difficult times arrive because of what the individual does in their life, and that can include this being stuck on blaming others, unresolved anger, or constantly giving up. These unhappy and unproductive people, they can avoid to take responsibility for adapting to a setback in their lives by not taking action and changing their thinking and behavior. They often resort to kind of irresponsible behavior and they blame everybody else for their predicament, whether it's a setback or a difficult time. So watch that you don't get stuck into blaming that something that occurred around you is someone else's problem that's affecting you as a victim. Another focus of blame is blaming themselves. You can blame yourself, and maybe sometimes you might have been the person that Einstein was talking about, what you didn't do. However, when you start getting into things that are unrealistic control, like, well, I'm too young, I'm too old, I'm too short, I'm too tall, I'm too skinny, I'm too large, I'm too uneducated to get over this problem. These are the things that people do to blame themselves that has no basis in reality. At some point, people who live optimistic lives decide to cut loose what I call these agony anchors. At some point, you have to start ruminating and do something about it and move on. It's often a task that appears difficult to accomplish without help or guidance, but my podcasts and my books will offer you ways to do that. And in this podcast, you're going to learn more effective ways. Research on resilient and optimistic people show that they have an internal locus of control, and what all that means is that they find responsibility for their lives lie within them. Pessimistic people have an external locus of control and blame others for their worry, their tension, their setbacks, and frustration. So It's better to have an internal locus of control, focus on what you can control, your reactions, your feelings, your focus, and don't be reactive. Use that external locus of control that makes you feel that you can't do anything about it. So that keeps you stuck. So I hope that's clear, because it's important to understand that the difficulties you hold on to further deplete your mood and health. And if you don't deal with it, you'll feel overwhelmed, anxious, and depressed. It leaves you feeling aimless and uncertain what to do to move on. So as a result, you'll further struggle and suffer. So watch for your blaming habits. Self-defeating thoughts and habits include blaming and dwelling on problems. And that's just a good way to think of it. And there are a bunch of people who, on the other hand, believe that a setback or difficult time is a kind of a sign that they need to make some changes in their life. They all serve a purpose. If we take time to learn from them, don't take it personally, just see what you're doing and what you're not doing, and not develop a story about it, because stories we develop about it is an anchor that holds you back. Setbacks and difficult times can teach us lessons, guide us, and help us learn life lessons that can only be taught to us at that time or when it matters. So let's get rid of those agony anchors that hold you back, the blaming others, blaming yourself. Just take responsibility for where you're at and let go of these agony anchors. So let's just explore a little more of stories we tell ourselves about setbacks, because that's really important. I find in working with thousands of people over the years that setbacks are common occurrence. It's part of your process. It's part of life. But what we tell ourselves about it is hypnotic and can keep you stuck. So my question to you is, what are you saying about your current setback that you're experiencing in your life, in your quest to make improvements in your life and make some changes in your life? What are you saying to yourself and others about your current setback or difficult time? So think about that. And if you can, take out your journal or somewhere that you make notes for yourself and write down your thoughts and your story about it. Because this is all about the choices you make. If you want to move on past your story, decide to take the following steps that I'll present to you right now. So think about your current setbacks. Think about what you're telling yourself and those closest to you about the situation. First, feel the emotions of your setback and difficult situations, such as frustration, anger, sadness. Notice these feelings and don't judge them. Don't avoid them. Avoiding your feelings contribute to creating feelings of overwhelming anxiousness and anxiety. So take the time now to feel your reactions and emotions now. And then second, release them. Let them pass. Do not hang on to the feelings, such as sadness, anger. Imagine them floating away like a bubble in the wind. Watch and feel the wind moving them away from you. Try to picture this right now if you can. When you have some time, just think about the answer to question one. What's the story? What's the feeling? It's important to acknowledge the feelings, but not get stuck there. We're going to let them just move on and float away from you. And then next, third, prepare yourself now to look ahead. Take a breath and just think. Get ready and focus on changing your life for the better. Why in the world would I say don't resist your feelings, even if they're negative? Is kind of a question I got recently. The key here is that resisting negative feelings makes it all worse for you. You may feel pressure building inside of you when you hold them inside of you. The pressure builds up over time and creates this uneasy feeling. Then when you feel nervous or lose sense of where these are coming from in the first place, it really confuses you. Holding emotions away from you really means that you're hanging on to them in your thoughts, feelings, and your body too. Your body will feel that. It makes things worse, not only for your thoughts and feelings, but for your entire life. When you feel the emotions, you're releasing resistance to them, and it'll help you release them and move past the blocks that you've created that makes you feel powerless. I recommend inviting them in, just observing them, don't judge it, write it down. The act of writing down helps you let them go, and use the steps above that I taught you to help dissolve and pass through you and release them. You'll feel a wonderful sense of calmness and quiet after you do this exercise. Why is that important? So you just keep focusing on the setback, avoiding the thoughts and feelings, This crowds out any room and energy in your brain, in your life, to reassess your goals and create some strategies to get around this. You can only hold one thought at a time in your mind. It's your choice which thoughts you will hold on to. So if you're going to constantly hold on to the agony, anchors, and reactions to the setback, you will have no energy, no focus in discovering what you need to do to modify your goals and make some shifts in your mind and your path to making those changes. These are productive turning points in your life. So the way you handle a setback during a challenge like this is productive in helping you learn to use these turning points in your life as a guide to help you move in another direction. And these people, resilient and optimistic people, believe it was a chance to head in a new direction. They saw it in a good way. Other people would give up or stay unhappy or stuck in a rut. Remember what you learned from me, that you can have an upsetting attitude or an upbeat attitude. You can focus on complaining or you can focus on solving. You can focus on this drawback or setback or an opportunity to change, to make things better. Since you can only have one thing at a time in your mind at any moment, the choice is now yours. Now you understand now from what I'm saying, you can make a choice and what I call mind shifts to make things better. During setbacks, difficult times, or times we're unhappy with our progress, the choice we make determine the meaning of our lives. What will you choose? Decide and determine that right now. If you choose challenging times or setbacks are a turning point or an opportunity to help you feel more control and direction in your life, you will see things start to manifest in your life. Some people see these setbacks as a great time to reinvent themselves, make modification in their goals and expectations. Remember, focus on what you can control, which is your reactions and your choices to either stay stuck or to move ahead. Now, if you're new to this podcast, you may need to listen to my episode in this Positive Life Answers podcast called Optimism Made Easy. So I will help you learn these basic optimism habits to help you feel more confident and less resistant to or less struggle to make improvements and changes in your life. So give that a listen to if you are new to this podcast. I just wanted to point that out for you. Make this shift in your feelings and thoughts so you can turn a difficult time or a setback into an opportunity to grow and improve your life. And some of those basic optimism skills that I taught earlier in this podcast can help you. And if you don't have time to do that and just listening to this episode, I guarantee you this will make a matter for you. And making a shift in your mindset from moving away from complaining and whining and moaning about a setback. Focus your mind in an energy shifting way, or a mind focused shift to what I call the magic questions. Remind yourself what you did to pinpoint what you want in your life, these heartfelt questions. So think a moment here when these setbacks come out and you're looking at ways to go in a good direction to resolve these setbacks and improve your life and make some shifts. Here are some steps to guide you to pinpoint what you really want in your life, heartfelt questions that will help you make some mind shifts in dealing with a setback on your road to making changes. So remember to ask yourself again these basic questions. Imagine or picture what you want in your life. What do you need to change and improve on regarding this setback? Imagine how you would feel a few years from now if you still not have brought into your life what you really want to have, improve, or change. What emotions does that bring up into you? Some people say that when I get hit with this question from me, it kind of hits them in their stomachs, it hits them in their head. Energetically, they feel that cringing type of feeling. So yeah, these are important questions to ask. If you don't make that mind shift we're talking about, what would happen in a few years if you didn't? Then, as Einstein said, what you do and don't do is important. So ask yourself this last question. Why have I not already accomplished this before? Many people say to me, well, they never really thought about it and about wanting these changes or improvements or shifts and never really worked on these desired, or they felt afraid of doing something differently, which led them to hold on to many excuses. So ask yourself why you have not accomplished this. Are there reasons and excuses or stories? Write them down. And imagine everything you did in the last week that you did. Picture all the activities you did and how much of those weekly activities actually helped you move closer to achieving your goals or what you want in your life, your vision for your life. You're like most people you follow, probably spend less than 50% of the time taking action that directly helps you achieve it. Or maybe you're discouraged because you have been focusing a little more than 50% and you can experience a setback. Just make a mind switch and think about, what am I learning from this challenge right now? And what do I need to do differently? Remember, setbacks may also be a sign that you need to change your routine with your goals. We talked a little bit once before about motivation and daily routines to staying on target with your goal and your vision for your life. A question I've gotten from some listeners saying, well, how do happy and productive people structure your day to be productive and efficient? What habits can you make to support your vision? Well, it really starts with your vision for your life. If you have a setback and you did your vision statement and you still have a setback, perhaps it's the steps that you need to look at more closely. And you also have to make sure the way you structure your routine for the day is supporting your goals and your vision for your life. And if you haven't heard my Victoria story, take a listen to when you go back to the optimism habits and my Victoria story. That will be important for you to listen to. But I don't want to repeat it here because I've done it a few times already. And maybe we'll revisit it live again. But I was a person who had many obstacles in my way. And what got me through all of those obstacles and challenges in my life was that I was optimistic deep down in my heart, and meaning that I had a vision for my life. I dreamed of a life in a certain way, and I worked hard to get there, to achieve it. I was not a daydreamer, I was actually visualizing my life. So let that be an important lesson for you, because an optimistic person, just like myself, who overcame setbacks and obstacles, to building a very successful business and personal life story, displays those traits. They display the 3 traits as I have done in my life and in helping others, is that they possess a clear vision of an exciting and meaningful and purposeful life. They work on goals to help them progress toward their exciting vision for their life. And they have this can-do attitude. And that takes high levels of responsibilities for your life. And I'm really teaching you in this podcast today about dealing with setback, is that you can have a can-do attitude. Also, I noticed that in my research for my self-improvement book, Spontaneous Optimism, that people who overcame their setbacks and difficult times, they found what they wanted to do, their meaningful purpose for their life, and they pursued what they loved to do, and it lit their fire. And they focus on what they want and not what they didn't want. They did not display worry, because worry is the number one happiness and energy zapper. The fastest way to fill yourself with endless joy and energy is to stop worrying. You're probably wondering, well, how can I do that? Well, each time you have a negative thought, replace it or switch it to a more upbeat, positive thought, such as a solution to your problem. People who focus on solutions rather than problems are happier, energetic, and successful. Focus on your guiding vision for your life. I call this the switching method or the mind shift method. So remember to practice that. Every time you start getting reactive to a setback, think about, what's my possible solution? For more ideas and a deeper dive into motivation and daily routines for success, please give episode 11 a listen to. So it'll help you set your daily routines. I've seen that when habits are not watched and not reevaluated to see if they're still serving you, you may become bored and not motivated by them anymore. So set your routines and keep an eye on them. Make sure they're in line with your goals and your vision. And make sure you watch your habits and morning routines, because when habits aren't watched and reevaluated to see if they're still serving you, you might become bored and not motivated by them anymore. So periodically review them. Remember, it's all about focus. Activity that becomes a habit when you feel guilty for not having done it, instead of feeling stressed that you have to do it. So let me repeat that. An activity becomes a habit when you feel guilty you have not done it, instead of feeling stressed that you have to do it. So developing a habit takes focused planning, and it can take 6 to 8 weeks for it to become a little bit more natural for you. It's important to understand that some people just give up too soon and expect it to be done within 3 weeks. So it's not the case. It takes time and patience and focus. Focus is an effective habit building strategy, and I'm trying to teach you that today in this podcast. Lastly, I just want to remind you about your stories that we just touched upon in the beginning. So a story is anything that we think or tell ourselves or others to describe what's happened or is happening in our lives, such as a setback. Our stories tell us what happened, what will happen, and what we can expect further in our lives. We have made and heard such stories presented by family members and friends at some point. And after hearing about this, you'll be able to notice your own stories and anybody else you interacted. We choose to repeat these stories like a mantra, and they become really hypnotic. Some people get caught up in interpretations of events in their lives and develop stories that begin to run their perspectives and mindset toward life that moves us ahead or keep us trapped. So focus so much on observing your stories. We focus so much on telling everybody our woes or stories that we forget to focus on stories about problem-solving ways, what you're going to do to resolve the situation. So the stories can be negative or positive. When they're negative, you become more of the victim mentality. You've probably heard about that, is when you feel like everything's against you, you feel like giving up, or you can be a victor, and that is when life or situations come up, you take responsibility for it and you move ahead to make things better. So example of victim stories is that, oh gosh, this always happens to me, I never get any breaks, it's too late, I can't do this anymore. Those are victim stories. Victor stories say, well, yes, things pop up and that's expected to happen. I acknowledge that this is happening and I'm going to look at some possible solutions to my problems with this. And I don't get stuck into that complaining mode. In other words, you're unhappy or have an unwanted situation or difficult times in which you either tell a story that moves your head or brings you down. Victimless stories can lead to a life full of hurt and sorrow or suffering. And this is something we're really trying to, in these podcasts, help you develop better ways to cope. So feeling stuck and unhappy will serve a purpose for us if we take the time to learn from them and the stories we develop about them. It's important to understand that we develop an outlook, a tale, or a story about how we interpret our challenges or problems. So watch how you react to a setback. Notice your thoughts, notice your feelings, write them down. If you start running a story, and you probably will, just observe your story, don't judge yourself. If you judge yourself, you get stuck. So remember, believe your story and it will run the rest of your life. Change your story and you can change your life. So remember, you're not doomed to stay stuck in them. Just these simple ways of doing these release and changing of observations and stories can help you move ahead after certain things pop up in your life. Remember, just simply turn off that suffering and victim mode and the stories you tell yourself about setbacks. Step one, observe your story. Just observe and listen to stories you're telling yourself and those close to you about what your setback is about. And then write those stories down in your journal. And then number two, just notice your thoughts, observe yourself. Observe what you're thinking and how and when certain thoughts appear in your life and problematic or setback times. Just write down your thoughts and patterns in your journal. You'll see if they are empowering or if they're the victim mode mentality as we talked about before. Remind yourself it's just a story. Remind yourself that the thoughts and tales are just a story. Release your attachment to the story and the stories from the past that you just observed. Why try to let go of the stories? Because it's a story, not who you really are deep inside. It's a knee-jerk reaction. But if you stay stuck there, it'll become who you think you are. Remember, these are just tales you created to deal with situations. So now that you know that this is an important pattern to change, just keep your eye out. And what I call the observer mode, that means you observe, but you don't get reactive emotionally. So writing them down is a really effective release technique. Once you do that, you'll be able to focus on the present moment and you'll learn to stop. So to free yourself from past stories and current stories that hold you back, just need to focus on the present moment. If you do the steps I just outlined, that releases those thoughts and you can focus on what's happening now, today, the current situation. Observe what you say and how you think and react about it. If the stories aren't serving you well, just stop them. And these are the ways to stop it, as we just talked about. The story just shows you where you just may need to make some improvements in your life, and you can walk away from it. So once you release and observe it, write it down and let it go. Remember, you need to replace it with a new story that will serve you better. Turn your victim story of why this happens to me into a victor story. This may be a difficult setback or situation, but it's a chance for me to do things in a different way. Identify your story and create a new one, because otherwise those old ones will start creeping back into your life. And once you identify your new story, start thinking about it and talking about it. A victor would say, my life is my choice, and I'm well able to create the life I envision. The victim would say, it's all my family's fault for being mean to me when I was growing up, and now I struggle and I am just so hurt. Which person do you want to be, the victim or the victor? Your life is your choice. It's time to move on. The victor is taking responsibility for their life, where the victim blames their adult life on past problems, and they stay stuck and helpless there. And we're trying to teach you empowering ways to do that. And those stories should be based on, your vision for your life. So keep the stories that serve and support you while you release and discard stories that hold you back. And now you know ways to do it. I want to end this podcast today with a real fun motivational hack that you'll always remember, because you'll hear it in your mind after this. Motivational hack when setbacks and problems pop up. Just keep picking yourself up over and over. Keep picking yourself up over and over. When my co-author, Dr. Michael Mercer, did research for one of his books, How Winners Do It, High Impact People Skills for Your Career and Life Success, he spent many days shadowing high achievers. He spent entire work days with successful people, and Dr. Mike learned firsthand how high achievers actually think, how they act, think, and handle a variety of situations, including problems and setbacks. One high achiever who he spent an entire day with, who was a very successful businessman and entrepreneur. The gentleman, along with his partner, created one of the most successful ventures in their field in North America. At one point during the day, this incredibly successful person turned to Mike, Dr. Mike, and said, Dr. Mike, the only difference between winners and losers, victims and victors, is that the winners pick themselves up exactly one more time than losers. So the only difference between losers and winners is that the winners pick themselves up exactly one more time than the losers. So you have fallen, or you stumbled right now because of a setback on your path to change. And you may fall again. Yeah, there'll be setbacks in the future, but that's all right. Imagine how much less you would be as a person if you did not keep picking yourself up exactly one more time. When I was creating my business and creating my vision for my life many years ago, I had my vision statement, my goals. I worked on them religiously, and there was a time of a setback. And I remember this story from Dr. Mike, my co-author, my husband. And there was a song out by a musical artist called Over and Over. And I would play that song in my head all the time. I would take this concept and play in my head. The concept of the song is, you get up again over and over. You get up again over and over. If you don't remember anything else from this podcast except this last line, you will succeed as well and improve your life. So please let me know how this lesson and teaching lands with you today. If you have any questions about it, feel free to email me at Dr. Mercer, that's DrMercer, at positivelifeanswers.com. Email me your questions and comments, or just go to the positivelifeanswers.com website, that's my website, and use the Contact Us form. And I'll respond to your comments and questions individually, and if you like, I'll address them in my podcast. So don't forget, go to positivelifeanswers.com, and you can sign up for my free newsletter there, or go to our online store to buy a signed autographed copy of Spontaneous Optimism and Bouncing Back from Difficult Times in our online store. And if you're stuck and need more help with these topics, you can contact me about my unique patented intensive coaching sessions. Yes, you hear a lot about coaching these days. I've been doing coaching for over 20 years and developed this technique that we patented together, my co-author and I, and have gotten so much results in our own life and other people that we have coached in our intensive coaching program. So give me an email and I can send you more information about that. So if you're ready to take a leap in your path to changing and improving your life, just send me an email about that. Finally, a note to my listeners: the podcasts I present to you today provides useful information to my listeners. It's published with the understanding that your host, Dr. Ann Mercer, is not engaged in rendering professional services in counseling or therapy through the contents and comments of the podcast today. If you need professional services such as counseling or psychotherapy, then you're responsible for seeking the services of a professional. I suggest that you contact your local state psychological association or your primary care physician for referrals in your area. So I look forward to hearing from you about this setback podcast today. Thank you for listening, and make it a fantastic day and a fantastic week again. Positively, Dr. Mary.